Well, we got the microphone working. Dorothy, you should be ecstatic.
I'm excited.
We got it in just in time, so Dorothy should, it's a present for her 90th birthday. So now she has,
No, I'm gonna be 92.
oh, we're behind a little bit, okay. But now, we're excited to get this new speaker system. I told you it was coming. So anyway, now we're all set with that, and I'd like to introduce our program speaker for today. We have Tony Arduino, and he has a very exciting program on the Italians of the Calumet Region. So let's welcome Tony Arduino.
Thank you. Yeah, if you guys, Mike, if you want to kill the lights up here, we're going to do a PowerPoint presentation. Again, my name is Tony Arduino. I'm a native of Lansing, and my family has deep roots in Calumet City, going way back 100 years or so. Currently, I'm a Hammond resident, and I'm a board member on the Hammond Historical Society, and also I'm a board member on the Downtown Hammond Council, which is located on Holman Avenue. The origins of this program has been in evolution for about 15 years. Maybe about 15 years ago, I just started a family tree project on my own. Back about 2000, 2001, the Ellis Island records were available to the public on the internet, and that got my curiosity going because I was able to trace my roots on my father's side to the cities where they came from in southern Italy. So that's been a hobby of mine for a while. And well, just about 3 months ago, I had approached a Professor Dominic Candelero, who is a Professor Emeritus from Loyola and Chicago Heights native, and I asked him to do a presentation on Chicago Italians, especially from Chicago Heights. And he's been an author of many books. He's been to Italy many times, and he asked me, well, if I'm going to come to Hammond for the first time and do the show, why don't you do a little history about the Italians from our region? And I said, sure, but I only knew about our Cal City roots. Because I always, you know, they talk about Taylor Street and Roseland and Grand Avenue in Chicago, and I said, well, there's stories out here in Cal City. They might not be in books, but there's a lot of verbal history, and we got a lot of artifacts out here. So I don't want to be the premier historian on Italians in the Calumet region, but nobody else is stepping up, so I'm going to do it. And we're going to talk about Cal City. We're going to talk about East Chicago. We're going to talk about Gary. And some of these stories I never heard about, maybe you never heard about, but I had an opportunity to go to the Calumet Region archives in Gary at the Indiana University campus, and they have just terrific archives of Italians from Gary and East Chicago. And by no means is this complete. I mean, I'd like to tell the story about the Roseland and Pullman Italians and Italians from Southeast Side, but we're going to run out of time, but maybe another time. So let's begin. This is just an interesting picture that I always enjoyed. All the way on the far right is my great uncle Mike Ferrantella. I'm happy that he's come out here, Mike Ferrantella from Munster, and he's there with our late Alderman Dominic Gigliotti, the short guy, and Mike Ferrantelli on the left, and his father with the cap. And the goat, I don't know if that was a junkyard goat, a pet. Uncle Mike, what's the story? I mean, what is it, just a novelty?
Well, that's something that he got. Well, that's something he just got involved in, and he wanted it around, and they usually had goat meat, you know, and all that kind of stuff later. But it isn't.
Yeah, thank you. But it's interesting story because, you know, the main thing I got, and I got some stuff up here I wanted to tell you. I got some stuff that was originally from the clerk's office of Calumet City. There's some copies of immigration stuff that's available at the South Suburban Genealogy Society in Hazelcrest, and I've been copying stuff over the years, so there's a bunch of great stuff over here you guys can view, and that's what got my curiosity too, because I started going through some of these names and stuff, and the men, they all came out to Cal City because of industry, especially the New York Central Railroad, and that's the one thing that I wanted to start off saying that the reason why people start coming here, immigrants, Italians, was because of industry. Like my family, for instance, they first came out to southeast Kansas to work in the coal mines, around 1910, 1920s, and then early 20s, late teens, the family started to come out here for the New York Central Railroad. So here's some interesting photographs from my family's collection. Down on the bottom is some laborers working on the railroad in Broadway Street, Uncle Mike, in Gary. I think in the Glen Park neighborhood. But that's just some shots, of dump truck. And there's another interesting photograph of, I don't know where they were, but the guy's second to the, Joe Gigliotti, who was Alderman Gigliotti's father, and his uncle, Tom Gambino. Who the other guys are, I don't know. That's why. Who do you think some of the other people are?
Well, Joe Gigliotti and Tony Falvo sitting on a push cart, and I don't see well enough to tell you who the other two are. And I don't know anything, but if you notice, when you talk about sanitary conditions today, that man with the scoop, everybody used to drink out of the same scoop. Some were smart enough to get their own container that folded up, and but it's sanitary conditions were totally different then.
Thank you. But that's just some of the image I want to show that unskilled laborers could work on the railroad. Just some other images I got of Italians, State Street. And like I said, I want to talk about when they came out here. State Street and Plummer Street was where they settled. And this is just some photographs that I had from the collection, Peroni birthday party, 46, and some ladies that were mix or match that worked at Queen Anne Candy. And they took a group shot by Walgreens in downtown Hammond, 1942. So that was something I wanted to add. We want to talk about Queen Anne Candy real quick. Located on Hoffman and Soul Street in Hammond. It was founded in 1921 in Chicago, and then it came to Hammond, Indiana in 1923. In the 1930s, it employed 600 employees. Some of the items that they made were nut clusters, almond, butter toffee, nutty Fagin, king nut loaf, mellow loaf, and many varieties of chocolate and caramel candies. Later, Queen Anne became Premier Candy Company. And there is a little photograph, a newspaper article from the Hammond Times, December 33, when the Sons of Italy branch was founded here in Calumet City in 1933. It was functional till, I believe, 2004 when Alderman Gigliotti was the president, and he passed, and that branch became defunct. Nobody wanted to, there was an offer to take it over, but it became defunct. But there's still branches, closest one being Chicago Heights and one being in Maryville. St. Victor's Church, a lot of parishioners out here. Thank you. Let's talk about St. Victor's Church. Was founded April 1925 on land purchased by the Archdiocese of Chicago. First Mass was May 1925. The first church was a wooden portable that was erected on the corner of 152nd and Price Street. And in September 1925, groundbreaking of the new church at Price and Memorial Drive. And the building was complete in June 1926. The Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur staffed the school till 1973. School dedicated in November 1927, and in July 1928, the existing cornerstone was laid. So here were some pictures I took early this year. Here's probably a wedding that was from a State Street family. I know the little girl on the far right is my grandmother, Ann Arduino, and I don't know who the bride was. I've had this picture for a long time. And interesting outfit. I know there's a Carlo Maggio on the top row to the second from the left. But just wanted to show you image, you know, there's many of these pictures that are around the area, especially, you know, I've seen ones, you know, same way with Polish families, but it's just an interesting photo of that couple.
Now, who that is?
What's that? Uncle Mike.
Bill Bacino, you guy got married?
I don't know, you tell me.
It looks just like him and Jenny. That they used to own the pizza in Calumet City. And my eyes are bad, but I would recognize most of those ladies that way.
Thanks. Yeah, right. I think that's what that is. I'm gonna move on, folks. Here's another one, again, you know, just interesting, you know, they did come from humble backgrounds, but they did have pretty elaborate dresses and, you know, menswear. You know, if they did have, you know, not much, they were really, really tailored, real nice. That's just another one from the 20s. Here's another interesting photo of an Italian funeral at Chiansky Funeral Home, 1929. The story of this young man that's deceased is he was an immigrant and he was out here for work, and he had a wife and children back in southern Italy, but he was in fact had a little fling for a family member, to be unnamed, but a fling for a female family member, and he was turned down. And in distraught, he committed suicide at a family's house on State Street. You know, committed suicide. So I don't know the name, except his name might have been Joe or Giuseppe. But it's an interesting photo because Uncle Mike, I think that's you with the baby on your mom's lap. And your aunts, and you know, Tony Falvo all the way to the right. And that's probably the immediate family that were in the black, the mourners, and you know, people. Right. Some other family, Genova family, and the Ferrantellas. But it's interesting because I've seen photographs like this all around. You know, this photograph was probably sent to the family back in Italy to show, you know, how lavish, you know, the flowers were, the body. I'm sure that he was probably buried out in St. Joe's in Hammond. But I'm trying to find some information about that. But this is the only one I've seen from Jahansky Funeral Parlor. Real interesting.
That's good.
Here's the St. Victor's wedding. You know, I just wanted to show you just some pictures, you know, of Sacco wedding, 1941. I wanted to mention some of the early names of families that supported the St. Victor's in the early days. Abadi and Pop, Ciata, Maniscalco, Caruso, Chicatano, Sidoti, Genova, Pomelia, just to name a few. And during World War II, there was 525 men and women of St. Victor's that were enlisted, and 11 men from the parish were casualties of World War II. The rectory was completed in 1955. And here's some pictures of some guys that served the war. There's Mike again, and Frank Arduino, and Orlean Piccirilli, who was the clerk here in Calumet City in the 60s. But I took some pictures inside St. Victor's. You know, they still got those plaques. I think those were from memorial gifts from 1959 that included the ceiling lights that were donated by the Montella family, the Azzarello family, the Cipolla, and the Mangiarosina family. So those plaques are still there in the back of St. Victor's Church. The Italian Catholic Federation Branch 195 was founded here in Calumet City in 1965. Originally, I had the chance to interview Joe Merlo before she passed a few months ago, and her family was one of the original founding members. I think the Catholic Federation Branch was, kind of a West Coast, San Francisco, California thing. And I think there was a priest out of Chicago that was knew about St. Victor's having a sizable Catholic parishioners, and they opened up a branch there. And of course, they always have that they were helping, the IFC helps support their church communities through human and financial resources. And they do the spaghetti dinners. There's a one from the early 90s, some of the ladies doing the spaghetti dinner. Well, I want to talk about a few notable people from Calumet City's Italian history. Orlene Piccirilli, he was a first generation Italian American. He, as you know, he's a World War II veteran. He was employed with the Calumet City Park Commission, building commissioner. He was a city clerk in Calumet City from 1957 and to 1965, and twice he was a mayoral candidate. And there's some pictures of him, I believe it was his first year as a clerk, Orlene Piccirilli. Sam Galata. He was born in 1914 in Iowa. His parents were of Sicilian descent. Sam quit school at the age of 13 to go to work and to support his family. He was the second oldest of 9 children. For 20 years, he was the school board president of School District 155. He was a precinct captain for 40 years. In 1951, Sam managed to acquire an empty lot that was just west of Calumet Memorial Park, which is Harrison, Garfield, Freeland, and Sibley. With the help of other gentlemen, they built a baseball field at their own expense. The field had dugouts and drinking fountains. This field would become Calumet City's first Little League field. In 1955, the Calumet City Babe Ruth League was formed, in which Sam held the titles of vice president, president, and district director. Sam would go on to win 17 consecutive annual elections up through his death in 1983 at the age of 69. All the positions he held dealing with the Babe Ruth League were all volunteer. He cared that all boys had the opportunity to play baseball. And it was in 1988 that the Babe Ruth Field was dedicated the Sam Galata Memorial Field. And I wanted to show a little shot of West Hammond Park, which you know is the Calumet Memorial Field House, and they have a real nice World War II plaque in front of all the men and women from West Hammond that served, and there's a lot of Italian American names on that. And there's Sam. Just wanted to show you some other pictures of some other notable Italians. Lawrence Duvingo was a first ward alderman. Frank Giglio, state representative, and he served many terms in the General Assembly. Then there's Joe Gambino, he was the 7th Ward Alderman for 8 years. There was a Joseph Petrucci, he was the Alderman for 12 years of the 4th Ward. Carmen Pignatello, and who else we got? Well, Dominic Gigliotti. Dominic was a veteran of the U.S. Army. 50-year employee of the John's Pizzeria. He managed the carryout that used to be in Lansing. He did that for 35 years. They called him the father of the Calumet City paramedics. He helped create the city's 911 center. We know him as the first ward alderman for 16 years, 7th ward alderman from 1993 to 2001, and mayor of Calumet City from 2001-2003. And like I said, he was the last president of the Order of Sons of the Lodge here in Cal City. And he had said, and this was a quote from the Times newspaper, that he wanted to be remembered as someone that was not selfishly motivated, but always acted in the best interest of the community. And he loved Calumet City. Here's a picture from State Street, his election headquarters back in the 1973. So there's a nice group photo of his family and friends. Calumet City has the sad distinction of having the only officer killed in the line of duty who was of Italian descent. This happened in 1939. A Lieutenant Gene Iatoni, him and another officer were responding to a burglary call at the Myers Pop Stand on State Line. And what they did, they surprised the 2 robbers. And one of them shot him and another bystander He lingered for a few days, but then he passed. And I guess back then the fire department didn't have any kind of pension. So I just recently came across some articles in the Hammond Times. They had, well, when he was lingering and dying in the hospital, there was hundreds of people waiting to give him blood transfusions. A lot of people showed up. There was a big rally to raise money for his wife and his child. And from late September to early October 1939, this was headline stuff. So Lieutenant G.I. Tony, he was hopefully the only officer here in Cal City that was killed in the line of duty in 1939. And we have an article right here that I got from the back here, a little article about it. And you can always look up here. And like I said, we got stuff back here you guys can look at. I just want to point out there's a chair right here donated by Mary Sieta that belonged to her Leonardo Sacco, Calumet City. It's over 100 years old, some chairs and stuff, and a footstool. Just wanted to point that out. What's that? Yeah.
He was so respected and liked. That's why he had all those donors for. Everybody liked that man. There was no friction among people and the police department. That's all I.
Thank you, thank you. I just wanted to show you a quick shot of Queen Anne candy. This is from the 30s of Queen Anne candy, and again, a lot of men and women from Calumet City of Italian descent worked at Queen Anne candy, and other, Polish people there from Hammond, Calumet City came and worked there because it was close. To walk from State Street to Hoffman and Seoul was nothing. Here's some great pictures. It's my Uncle Jay's grandmother, Catherine Pomelia. Some great shots of the ladies on the assembly line. And then now that building's gone. They just tore that down a few years ago. So just, it's a great shot. You don't see too many shots of the factory. John's Pizzeria, of course, I gotta mention that. The self-rising crust. They started in 1943, founded by Phil Bacino. His grandson is currently running the carry-out one in Munster. I just got a copy of the menu over here. They're up. It was carry-out only, and then I think this year they got dining area. So if you like the crumbly crust or crumbly sausage, check it out. But this was the place to be, Uncle Mike. I know we could do a whole show on John's Pizzeria. I mean, my dad worked there as a busboy. Great stories, always packed. I mean, we could do a story on itself. I don't know if you want to add anything, Uncle Mike, but go ahead.
Well, he started out across the street. Where he's at, that location used to be Serafini grocery store. And he started out across the street in a Chesterfield lounge with 4 tables, I think, and then right next to the bank building over there. And he then became successful in that, so he bought Serafini's grocery store and converted it to a pizza place and a bar, and they were very successful.
Thank you very much. Yeah, here's some shots, of the bar. I don't know if that's probably one of the, maybe the grandchild of the baby. John's put a little publicity shot. But yeah, that's just a shot in the 40s or early 50s of, it was the place to go, If we talk about how many pizza places there are in the region right now, this started this trend here, at least probably on the south side of Chicago. Well, I'm going to move on, guys, to East Chicago, Indiana. And let's talk about why Italians came to East Chicago. Well, again, labor. Italian immigrants started coming to inland steel maybe as early as 1905 or 1907 because they wanted to work in the mills. Bricklayers, the furnaces. There was Italian pipe fitters at Youngstown, Sheet and Tube. Men worked 12-hour days and Saturdays till noon. The early Italian immigrants lived on Todd and Olcott Streets, which was south of Chicago Avenue. Some lived in the harbor and the neighborhood called Oklahoma. In 1913, Carmelite sisters arrived in East Chicago to open a children's home and evangelize spiritually lukewarm immigrants. The sisters petitioned the bishop for their own church. Italian Precious Blood Fathers opened Sacred Heart Mission near 148th and Todd Street. They closed unexpectedly in 1927. Let's see what I got here. In early 1930s, East Chicago Italian leaders traveled to distant Fort Wayne and petitioned Bishop John Knoll to send a priest to the city. Back then, there was no archdiocese of Gary was created in the 40s or 50s, so the archdiocese that included Hammond, East Chicago, and Gary were part of the Fort Wayne diocese. Italian-born Reverend Michael Campagna, a canon lawyer, came to East Chicago in 1933. Many people believe that the founding of an Italian parish during the Depression was financially impossible. In 1930, a little over 2,000 Italian residents resided in Lake County, Indiana. This parish would become Immaculate Conception Catholic Church, and Campagna would be the founding pastor, which was at 149th and Olcott. Salvaging bricks from city streets and low-cost bricks from an abandoned brickyard, the Italians of the community labored, unemployed masons and parishioners, and the church and hall was completed in 1935. This church would become one of the 2 national parishes in Indiana. And unfortunately, this church did close in 1994. And it's still standing, and I don't know who has it now, but you could see the bricks, if you come up close there, look like the big paver bricks, not common bricks. So, real interesting church. There's just a picture of it from the 30s and a picture from 1934 when Father Campagna was laying the cornerstone in East Chicago. I want to talk about, in the early 40s, Monsieur Campagna founded the Hoosier Boys Town, which we know as Campagna Academy in Cherville, Indiana. He was determined to do something positive for boys from broken homes. He wanted to help boys that were homeless, gone astray, or whose families were unable to support the boys. They say that Campagna Academy or Hoosier Town is not an institution but a home. Not an institution but a home. And it's still running. Dr. John B. Nicosia, mayor of East Chicago in the 60s and early 70s. He graduated from the University of Georgia and the University of Rome Medical School. He was a veteran of the U.S. Army, which he attained the rank of captain. He was a recipient of a Purple Heart due to being wounded in action. He also was the former chief of staff at St. Catherine Hospital in East Chicago. Mayor of East Chicago, 1964 to 1971. He led the fight for clean air legislation in East Chicago and at the state and national levels. His civic improvements included urban renewal and opening new community centers. And there's a picture of him down the bottom when Robert Kennedy came to East Chicago. And the guy in the middle is, I think, Mayor Haggerty from Whiting. The Cesare Battisti Lodge, number 27. Cesare Battisti Musical Lodge was organized by a Mr. Vespanzi, a Mr. Farini, and a Mr. Bonaventura as a social club sponsoring a band in East Chicago. Members soon affiliated with Unione Siciliani, later named Italio America National Union, a Chicago-based fraternal order that provided life insurance. First meeting was in 1919 at 147th and Indianapolis Boulevard. They noted that in 1920 there was 381 Italians in East Chicago, and in 1930, 536 Italian-born citizens, which were a mixed group of people from Sicily, Naples, Rome, and the ruins of Pompeii. In 1956, they built Cesare Battisti Hall at 148th and Olcott. Some of the early names, parishioners, were Farini, Manelli, Calacci, and Basso. In 1941, the lodge purchased its own club at 148th and Olcott, which was just one block of Immaculate Conception Church. Of course, the lodge is alive and well right now. We'll know it as Villa Cesare in Cherville, which is right off the boulevard, the banquet hall in Cherville. That was built in 1989, and there have been many members of Cesare Battisti that have been honored by the Italian Republic. And that's some of the guys that are, that's Mr. Protesta, one of the lodge members. Moving on, we're going to talk about Gary, which, you know, I didn't know the story about them until a few months ago when I went to the archives in Gary, and they had some great archives of newspapers and pictures, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So the earliest known Italians came to Gary about 1901, and it's been recorded that in 1903 or 1904 there was Italians that were working on the Wabash Railroad as track maintenance men. And this was before there was any settlement in the city of Gary. The city of Gary was established in 1906. Of course, they came to the mills too out there. U.S. Steel, Gary Works, and right when they were built, 1906, 1907. Their occupation could start as a brick mason and finish as a foreman. They lived in the Patch area in Gary, which was separated by the Wabash and Pennsylvania Railroad. The Ligura brothers are credited with being the first Italians to settle permanently in Gary in the year 1906. They opened a grocery store and a general contracting business. The first shoe shine shop in Gary was opened in 1907 by a railroad watchman named Mike Vitucci. And here's some pictures of early Gary. Very rural. Here's a picture of this Mike Vitucci on 9th and Broadway. The first physician of Italian descent in Gary was Dr. Giorgi. He'd established a hospital at 19th Street and Adams. The first city attorney of Italian background was Thomas Galassini. Organizations in Gary that were exclusive to Italians included the Sons of Italy, organized in 1916, the Italia-American National Union, the Moguno Club, and the Italian Education Association, incorporated in 1929. This organization was organized to provide scholarships for outstanding high school graduates of Italian background. At one time, the association sponsored classes at Froebel School for Adults to learn English and prepare adults for citizenship. And here's interesting, there was a few newspapers I came across of Gary, this Corriere dell'Indiana. These were put out around World War I, and they were very patriotic newspapers. A lot of, there was advertisements, there was how to take a citizenship test, question and answer, the words to this Star-Spangled Banner, a lot of patriotic stuff. A lot of stuff dealing with why America is in the World War I. But they had just some terrific advertisements in the paper, you know, to buy Ford cars in Gary or in Hammond, or go see a dentist, or a meat market. Very interesting. Here's some more advertisement. Sticking with religion, in 1917, the St. Antonio Episcopal Mission at 19th and Broadway, 19th and Adams Street, was founded by Mr. Accomando, Episcopal priest who was born in Sicily. This Mr. Accomando was especially active in Italian clubs and community affairs, and published a newspaper called Il Corriere del Popolo Italian Americano. I don't know if it's related to this one or what. He was also an editor of the newspaper called, he was editor of this newspaper that I'm showing. Like I said, the print paper was in English and Italian. St. Antonio Church closed in 1927. In the 1930s and 1940s, Italians began to move from their little enclave at 17th and Broadway to the new area south of 35th Street, which we now know as Glen Park area. By the mid-50s, it was estimated that 7,000 persons, or 2,500 families of Italian descent, resided in Gary. And here's another picture from 1937 of the Italian-American Athletic Club. Gary Jubilee Parade, 1956, there was a float for Italian-Americans, had a float in the parade. That was a big event. That was the Jubilee of 1956. I wanted to quote Mr. Peter Calachi. He was East Chicago, a native and a member of Cesare Battisti Lodge. he is quoted as saying, "To be Italian is to be proud with passion." And of course, I know that you guys got a lot of passion out here, members and guests, and I was glad to come out here today and share this event, this speech with you guys, and hopefully next time I'll add some more neighborhoods to it, because there's so many stories. Like I said, even fresh stuff I got from my Uncle Mike, and we can talk about railroad history with Italians just alone. That's a story in itself. State Street, I mean, I could do a whole show on State Street. There's so many stories there, where we're not going to go into that. We don't got time. So I just wanted to, reflect on the history of Italians here in the Calumet region. I'm glad you guys came out, and if you got any questions, please come up. I wanted to point out that member of the Calumet City Historical Society, Cynthia Gorick, has a nice poster here of Calumet City's railroad history. Please take the time to read that. It's really nice. Item here over here, we got some St. Victor's class pictures. I got some immigration stuff you can look up here, artifacts over here, and then I got some posters and some DVDs for sale right here on the back table, courtesy of the Mid-American Preservation Society here in Hammond. I work for a part-time gentleman by the name of Anthony Diaz, who works in the mill with me. He's a local historian. We do a lot of stuff with transferring films onto DVD. I'd like to grow our Calumet City collection, because we got a lot of Hammond, Gary, East Chicago stuff, sports, parades, and beyond. So take your time. If you've got any questions, take a look back there. Those are for sale. Back there in the back room, we got big posters for sale. And folks, that's all I got for today. I appreciate you coming out and listening to me and sharing stories. Thank you for coming out. Thank you.